Jack Freeman was already dead when the truth came out. For weeks, his family searched for answers. Friends whispered about his sudden disappearance. The police knocked on doors, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Then, finally, someone talked. A name was spoken. A relationship was revealed. Jack had a wife. Someone no one expected. Someone he should have never married. Her name was Katerina, his niece. By the time the world knew the truth, Jack was gone. Catherine was in handcuffs. And the question that still lingers isn't just why she did it, but how long it had been leading to this. March 22, 2022. A Tuesday. The kind of day where nothing remarkable should have happened. But in this town, on this street, in this house, Jack Freeman was found dead. And by nightfall, his name would be on every tongue, whispered in hushed voices, spoken with disbelief. Neighbors stood at their fences, watching as police taped off the front yard. Some shook their heads. Others just stared. Because no one, not a single person, had ever suspected that Jack Freeman's life had been anything but ordinary. A neighbor once described saying, "Jack? He was quiet, kept to himself. Friendly enough, but, one of those people you don't ask too many questions about." Who was Jack Freeman? 42 years old. A man of habit, known for his predictable routines. He worked, he came home, he locked his doors. Some called him private, others secretive, but no one thought much of it. Jack was the kind of man who never made waves, never caused trouble. But when the details of his life came out, people began to wonder. Had they missed the signs? Had they ignored what was right in front of them? Jack had no known wife, no children, no real social life to speak of. A few relationships in his younger years, but nothing serious, nothing lasting. And that was the first detail that made people pause. Because Jack did have a wife, and she had been standing right beside him the entire time. Katerina. Katerina was Jack's niece, 26 years old. Smart, well-spoken, known for her charm. She had lived with Jack on and off for years. First as a child, when family troubles forced her to stay with him. Then as a teenager, when things at home became difficult. By the time she was an adult, the arrangement seemed normal. Jack was her guardian, her protector. But at some point, that relationship changed. Family members later admitted they had noticed things. The way she spoke about him, the way she looked at him, a possessiveness in her tone when other women were mentioned. A witness once said, "It wasn't right. I remember thinking that. The way she clung to him, it wasn't like a niece. It wasn't like family." The truth didn't come out until after Jack was gone. A marriage license, signed, dated, filed in a county 2 states away, where no one would recognize their names. Jack Freeman and Catherine, husband and wife. The family never knew. Friends never suspected. The few who might have guessed never spoke up. And the ones who had their suspicions, well, they never imagined it would end like this. For a long time, it had just been whispers, strange glances, uneasy feelings. But now there was no denying it. Jack Freeman had married his niece. And now, Jack Freeman was dead. The family had questions. Too many. And not enough answers. Jack Freeman was dead. And now they were left with a truth they could barely say out loud. He had married his niece. For years, they had dismissed the warning signs. A closeness that didn't seem right. A loyalty that felt more like obsession. And now, standing in the wreckage of his life, they asked themselves, how had they let this happen? The marriage certificate was discovered by accident. A single sheet of paper tucked away in a drawer. A signature in Jack's unmistakable handwriting. Katerina's name beside his. The date sent a chill through the family. Months before his death. Long before anyone had suspected a thing. His sister, Catherine's mom, was the first to speak. No. One word. That was all she could say. Then again. No. No, no, no. But denial wouldn't change the truth. Jack had married Katerina. And now Jack was dead. It didn't make sense. Jack had always been the responsible one. The protector. The uncle who took care of his family, not someone who would destroy it. But maybe that was the mistake. Thinking he had been in control at all. People who knew Catherine spoke of her carefully. She had always been the type to get what she wanted. A girl who could convince you of anything. Someone who never took no for an answer. In relationships, she had a pattern. Men came and went. They left quietly, quickly. No one ever explained why. And Jack? Jack had never been able to leave. There were moments people remembered, but only after it was too late. A sharp look when Jack spoke to another woman. A laugh that didn't quite match the mood. The way she would place a hand on his shoulder, fingers curling slightly, as if reminding him, "You belong to me." And then there were the fights. There had been yelling. Late at night. Slamming doors. Jack's voice raised, then cut off. And always, the next morning, Katerina smiling like nothing had happened. Jack had started to change. A man who once followed routine had begun to break from it. He stopped answering calls. Stopped showing up to family events. And then the messages started. "We need to talk." It wasn't just one message. Catherine's, sharper. Then a crash. Silence. The next morning, the neighbor saw Jack leaving the house alone. His hands clenched. His shoulders tight. And for the first time, Jack looked afraid. 24 hours later, Jack Freeman would be dead. March 22, 2022. The last night of Jack Freeman's life. At 11:47 p.m., he was seen on a security camera. Walking. Alone. Shoulders tense. Hands in his pockets. At 12:06 a.m., he stopped at a gas station. Bought a single bottle of water. He looked over his shoulder twice before leaving. At 1:14 a.m., he parked outside his house. Sat there. Motionless. Phone in his hand. A message typed but never sent. "We need to talk." Jack hesitated. Then he stepped out of the car. He walked up the path, opened the door, and disappeared inside. By 3:32 a.m., he was dead. The 911 call came in at 3:38 a.m. The voice on the other end was shaking. Breathless. "I think he's dead. Oh my God. There's so much blood." The dispatcher asked for details. The caller hysterical. Rambling. But one thing was clear. Jack Freeman was lying on the living room floor. He wasn't breathing. And the woman who called for help was Katerina. When first responders arrived, the house was silent. The front door was unlocked. The living room lights still flickered. A chair overturned. A shattered glass on the floor. And Jack. He lay on his back. Arms limp at his sides. His body twisted unnaturally still. Blood pooling beneath him. And beside him, the knife. The officers found Catherine sitting on the front steps. Barefoot. Her clothes stained red. She was staring at the pavement, rocking slightly. She didn't speak when they approached. Didn't answer when they asked what had happened. She just whispered the same thing. Over and over. "I didn't mean to." One officer knelt beside her. Asked again. This time she looked up. And she smiled. The autopsy report was brutal. Jack Freeman had been stabbed 3 times. Once in the chest. Twice in the abdomen. The blade had punctured his lung. He had bled out within minutes. But there was something else. A sedative. Traces of it in his system. Enough to slow his movements. To weaken him. To make sure he couldn't fight back. There were defensive wounds on his hands. Bruises on his arms. Scratches along his neck. Jack had tried to stop what was happening. But the struggle hadn't lasted long. Katerina's story changed. First, she told police it was self-defense. That Jack had attacked her. That she grabbed the knife in a panic. Then, she said it was an accident. That she hadn't meant to hurt him. That everything had happened so fast. But the evidence told a different story. The wounds were precise, deliberate, and the sedative in his system. That wasn't an accident. Jack Freeman never had a chance. The last known footage of Catherine before the murder, March 21, 2022. A convenience store. She walks in, picks up a bottle of wine, pauses, then grabs something else. A small, unmarked box. At the register, she doesn't speak. Just slides cash across the counter. Picks up the bag. Walks out. The security footage has no sound. But as she steps through the door, She's smiling. Catherine was arrested at 4:12 a.m., less than an hour after the 911 call. She didn't resist, didn't ask why. She just held out her wrists, let them cuff her. And as they led her to the squad car, she was still whispering, "I didn't mean to." At 7:36 a.m., detectives sat across from Catherine for the first time. A camera in the corner recorded every moment. She didn't cry, didn't ask for a lawyer. She just sat there, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes hollow. The first question was simple. "Tell us what happened." Her response was even simpler. "Jack's dead." They pressed her, asked her to explain. But every time her answers were the same. "I didn't mean to. It just happened. Jack's dead." But the details, she never got those right. Detectives knew something was off. Catherine's story shifted with every question. First, she said Jack had attacked her, that she fought back, that she grabbed the knife without thinking. Then, she said she didn't remember, that everything had happened too fast, that when she came back to herself, Jack was already on the floor. Then she blamed the sedative, said Jack had taken it himself. But the toxicology report told a different story. The drug wasn't something Jack had ever been prescribed. It wasn't something he had a history of using. And the amount in his system, enough to make sure he never stood a chance. The detectives asked again, "Did you drug Jack?" For the first time, Katerina smiled. For days she refused to admit what happened. But then something changed. On the fourth day of questioning, she leaned forward, looked straight at the lead detective, and said one word, "Fine." Then she started talking. She said Jack had betrayed her, that he had promised they would be together. But then he changed, started pulling away, started talking about leaving. She said she had to do something. "I couldn't let him just throw me away." But even as she spoke, something was missing. Remorse, regret, a single moment of hesitation. It never came. "I didn't want him to leave, so I made sure he couldn't." The trial began 8 months later. The courtroom packed, the media swarming. Everyone wanted to know, who was Catherine? Really? A woman trapped in a twisted relationship? A victim of manipulation? Or was she the manipulator all along? This was not self-defense. This was not an accident. This was control. This was power. This was murder. They laid out the evidence. The sedative. The text messages. The insurance policy in her name. She planned this. She knew exactly what she was doing. Then the defense. A different story. Catherine, they said, had been groomed, conditioned from a young age. That Jack had blurred the lines first. That he had backed her into a corner, and she had acted out of desperation. She was a victim long before Jack Freeman ever died. The jury watched her closely. Her face, her hands, the way she flinched just slightly when her lawyer touched her shoulder. The question hung in the air. Was Catherine the villain? Or had Jack's own secrets led to his death? The deliberation lasted 3 days. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." Catherine showed no reaction, no tears, no outburst, just the same quiet stare, as if she had already known how this would end. Life in prison. No possibility of parole. Jack Freeman was dead. Catherine would never be free again. And yet, one question still lingers. Was this a love story gone horribly wrong? Or had this been the plan all along? Were there accomplices? Hidden motives? Was there another secret Jack was hiding? The final question, was this truly a crime of passion? Or something far more sinister? As the dust settles, the chilling question remains. Was Jack Freeman's death truly a crime of passion? Or was there something far darker behind it all? The court has spoken. Katerina is guilty. But some of the answers still evade us. What pushed a niece, someone who should have been close to her uncle, to take such a brutal step? Was it love? Or was it something else? Jack Freeman had lived a quiet, solitary life. But underneath that surface, were there hidden desires? Secrets buried deep in the shadows of his past? Did Katerina manipulate those weaknesses to get what she wanted? knowing exactly how to push him? Or did Jack himself play a part in fueling the very flames that led to his demise? We know the facts. We know the evidence, the trial, the arrest, the confession. But do we truly know the full story? We want to know your thoughts, your theories. Leave them in the comments below. Let's discuss. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There's always more chilling true crime stories waiting for you here. Don't miss a single one. Until next time, stay safe. Keep questioning. And remember, sometimes the truth is harder to uncover than we'd like to admit.